Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of ShiftED podcast, coming to you today. And I think my guest is also in our province of Quebec. Is that true, Kate?
I am. Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent.
I'm in Montreal.
Excellent. So I have Kate Arthur here, who is been around education for a long time, ed tech a long time. She's presently co-founder of Combs Global. Is that how you say it?
Comms.
Comms,
Yeah.
COMZ.
Yeah.
And which kind of helps people look at how AI can be accessible for everyone. Kate, you might know also from Kids Code, which she started way back. She's now transformed in Digital Moment, offering great services to our educators here in Quebec. So, Kate, thanks so much for taking me up on this invite and coming to talk to us.
It's super to be here. And Quebec Learn was when I started Kids Code the idea was started in 2012 and we established in 2013. And Quebec Learn was one of our first partners to bring in summer training coding workshops. So it was a long while ago, but still really important work.
Those. Yeah. The collaboration goes on today.
That's great.
We had Digital Moment come and do a couple of AI workshops. May came on, who was great, and we shared those out, and the attendees thought it was great because we have to start somewhere, right? And AI is a new thing. Kate just put out her first book. Is that correct, Kate? Your first book?
Yeah.
Am I Literate? AI Literate. A little play on words there. So we're going to talk about her book and also just about AI and its whole infusion into our educational system. So, Kate, before we start all of that fun talk, let's get even more knowledge from where it all started for you. If I were to ask you, like, what were some of those poignant tipping points in your career that kind of brought you to where you are now? What would some of those be? How did you kind of make your way into this AI ed tech field?
Yeah, so it feels like it does feel like a long time ago, but I studied English literature. I've always wanted to be a writer. It's what I thought I would become was a writer and a publicist. So I worked in communications and as a publicist and in London, England as a writer. Loved it. The power of the word for me. I could spend hours, mulling over a sentence. Just the power of that to convey a feeling, an emotion, and stringing it all together. So that's really what I thought I was going to end up doing. And then life happens, right? So I met my now husband in the late 1990s in England, and he was in technology. So he's a programmer, a developer, and now actually we run an IT company together. We founded one in the mid 2000s here in Canada. And so it was really through being exposed to his work early on where I started to dabble a little bit in what is all of this technology. And this was before social media, before smartphones, and before the cloud became a thing. And, I was doing my thing in London and I worked in the entertainment industry in theatre there. And he was doing his thing. And then we decided, London is a fantastic city, but it's time to take a break. So we sold everything and packed our bags and bought a ticket to around the world ticket. And he said, why don't we build a website to communicate with family and friends while we're gone? For me, that was a daunting idea. And I, this again, my WordPress, none of this stuff existed. And he said, you do all the writing and the content and I'll build the back end. And so that was really my first moment of being exposed to code. And it was the first opening to how similar it is to the work I had been doing for those years in communications. But how we were communicating was changing, and little did we know how much it would, how much of the disruption. But that was really the early days of this digital world being formed. We had the internet and the World Wide Web had come a decade earlier, and now we were building our lives in the digital space. So social media was coming along. We were connecting socially. Gaming actually plays a real fundamental role in the development of AI back since the 1950s. But at this period, it was progressing rapidly. Video games and that all that development. So that I found really, really interesting. And we started a tech company. We moved to Montreal. I had family. My family was here, and I had done high school here, and I had got a job at CBC Radio Canada, and in communications. And we decided to start a tech company together. And what we were doing was moving primarily not-for-profit companies, helping them move their physical to the digital. Cloud computing was like 2007, 2008, was starting to move. So we were seeing, big business models shifting. So Google was developing Google Drive, and we were seeing this movement happening of where our data lived on our machines. And now they were moving out elsewhere. And so again, for me, that was another moment of, we are now losing control, but able to connect in ways, it's like this double-edged sword of, where is our data going? And it was a real concern for clients at the time because, everything was free or almost free if you moved everything to the cloud, but you were losing your access to your own data and the control of it. Right. So that was another moment, and that's in the early 2010 2011 is when I really realized our education systems aren't moving as fast as they need to keep up with the role of communicating and creating. So not my focus wasn't computer science. It was how are we making sure our kids know how to build this world that is being built so quickly, and we were living in, right? We were virtually living in this space. So what do we need to bring to the kids? So that's when I started Kids Code Jeunesse, and at that time. So that was also like a big moment. And then the last big moment was in 2016, and I was in Ottawa. And, I felt my job, I have a soapbox, literally I do behind me, and I get on it a lot. And one of them was to try and get money to focus on coding and bringing this into school systems and community. So, looking at the different types of education, so formal, informal, and non-formal education structures, and how can we bring coding into youth environments. And it was in 2016 where the first time I heard artificial intelligence, and I had no idea what it was, and I thought, okay, I couldn't figure it out. And then because the government industry was already putting pressure. Which is usually what happens for industries moving very, very quickly, and so the structures start to change. Right. And so I was in a classroom 6 months later or so, and one of our teachers from École au Pied de la Montagne, she was Marjolaine. She was one of our first. Anything that I felt like we needed to pilot, it would go into her classroom. Nice. And so we were in her class. I was in her classroom, and she started to use Siri. And I thought, I don't think the kids have any idea. Now we have technology responding. So no longer is it just human to human, but now we're in a relationship with human to machines. Right. And then I went down the rabbit hole of AI. So I think I took my first AI course in 2017. And I say this to her, if I can understand it, anyone can understand it. My brain is not a computer science one. Right. And so that's sort of like the moments in my journey of what brought me to where I am today.
Right. And now a published author.
Yes. I finally became a writer.
That literary degree came in handy here in the end. That's so great. Now, I read too that you looked at the AI education frameworks with UNESCO, and those came out not too long ago. What was your role in that? And can you kind of give us a little bit of an idea of the framework that they suggested, or the functionings that UNESCO were thinking about when you were working with them?
Yeah. So that was a highlight of my career in the last decade, was working with UNESCO. We had a really strong relationship here in Canada with CC UNESCO, the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. And Sebastien Goupil, who was the Secretary General at the time, this is again like 2017. He said, "Kate, can we speak?" And he said, "I've got something. I have not an urgency as much as there's a pressing need that I'm seeing, and some patterns that I'm seeing that I want to talk to you about." So I got on the call with him, and if anyone of you knows Sebastien, he's full of energy and he's like a doer. You know, you speak to him, you know, whatever he's going to say, he's going to do. And he said, I'm hearing waves around the world about algorithm literacy. This need for our kids to understand what algorithms are and how their effect in the world. And so we embarked down that journey together. And eventually, in the next couple of years, we went into a partnership with UNESCO at the international level. So we had algorithm and data literacy. We brought the two together.
Yeah.
And then my role was really to help share that and bring that to the 192 member states. And it wasn't a big role. It was more, you know, when they needed me to go and speak on that project, I would. And so we had an established relationship, and it was, you know, these things you look back at, but you realize like nobody was doing what we were doing. Like there was no AI education frameworks. There was no. It wasn't on anybody's radar. So similar to when we started Kids Code Jeunesse, it was sort of like trying to figure out what was needed to put the pieces together. And now we have so much available and resources, which is fantastic. But at the time, there wasn't that. And UNESCO took this leadership role in looking at, they had already done the AI ethics. So they had already been very involved in this, and under the leadership of Feng Sheng Miao, who runs the department there, very, very progressive in AI and its impact and what it can and cannot do for education. And he invited me to be an expert on their helping build their frameworks. So it was a very small role. I went to Paris a few times, and we sat in, you know, very small rooms, you know, very much like like you imagine in a school, in like the principal's office. That's what it was like. And you sit in there and with experts in building frameworks. So my contribution in these in building the framework. So there are two of them. One is for teachers, and then one is for students. And I was focusing on the one for students. And it was, how do we connect the computing world and the computing, you know, the journey that we had already been through, computing with coding and computational thinking and physical computing with AI. So that was sort of like my lens of making sure we were anchoring. And I would say like to the literacy, right? To the computing literacy. We were anchoring to that. And then also keeping a strong lens on the ethics side of it. So that was also my role. You know, Montreal, we're very fortunate to be surrounded by incredible researchers doing great stuff. And the Montreal Declaration for Responsible AI had come out by then. The Montreal AI Ethics Institute was up and running. So there was a lot of stuff happening, and I was, and still am. I still work with the Montreal AI Ethics Institute, just keeping an eye on that ethical lens. So those were the frameworks, and it's very, very high level, because the complexities you realize when you're working at an international level, how complicated the world is.
Yes.
You know, everybody has access, different, and especially AI, because cultures are different, values are different. So you can't you know, enforce or instill anything. It's more, again, very, very high level frameworks.
Great. And what kind of AI mindset did you get out of doing that interaction? Like, did you start to see AI in a different light? I imagine you would have with all of that exposure and the conversations and the like. Where's your mindset at now with AI? If you were to look at it as a separate thing, where do you see it?
With the work with UNESCO, you realize, oh my God, there's some brilliant people in the world. Like, to be able to learn from some of the best minds and people with so much experience was for me just like, wow, this is neat.
Yeah.
And the care, right? So we're very quick to judge and say, oh, you know, these people passionate, care, dedicated to education. And I learned, so there were two people that I worked really closely with. One was a computer science scientist. I believe she was Stanford, very, very heavy computer science mind frame. And then the other one was also, she was studied linguistics and education. So she, Bloom's taxonomy and whatnot. So brought that perspective. And so the two together really helped me see how numbers and words are absolutely fundamental to not just reading and writing, not just computing, but to AI. And that's sort of how I hadn't, and it's just coming to me now as we're talking, but I hadn't really, like, I'd seen the connections for myself in these being ways of communicating, but an actual literacy where we have skills and tools and knowledge to be able to create and communicate. And it's really with numbers and words. So, that's, and then that's why I felt this need to also put my book together.
Absolutely. Well, and mentioning that, so you asked the question, your title is a question, right?
Yes.
Am I literate?
Yeah.
What is literacy in a digital age?
Well,
or an AI age, I guess. I mean, digital AI probably interfused quite a bit.
Yeah, and I would say literacy. So if you're literate today, it has to include AI, because if we're literate when we can access the data, when we can transform it into knowledge and respond meaningfully. So the biggest takeaway in literacy today for me is that machines are now literate too. Right? So machines can access the data, transform it into knowledge, and respond meaningfully. And I think that's where lies a lot of the gray or the color of what we need to dig into and to be educating our kids around is literacy is it, and data. So whether it's the kipunots, which I talk about from the Inca time, to words, reading and writing, which is really in the Enlightenment and the first Industrial Revolution, reading and writing really plays a strong role in why innovation and becomes how innovation advances very quickly. So that'd be like the first and second Industrial Revolution, and the third and fourth Industrial Revolution, we're going into computing literacy, so coding. So we need to know how to code, to build, to create and communicate. And then with AI, how data is working, how algorithms are working. Now as we're moving forward, we're now in this new environment of literacy where we're not the only ones who are literate. So how do we build relationships to be able to create and communicate responsibly with each other, with machines, and also build these machines so that they're responsibly communicating with each other? Because now which is where the worry of losing the control, because we're not involved in that literacy, that relationship anymore.
Right. I guess too, the challenge that I see anyway from the educational standpoint is fusing kind of the technology and what it can do with teachers, professional jobs and what they used to do and how it evolves, and like creating that awareness, or almost like developing a different kind of mindset around what AI is. Because so far what we've seen in the educational world are preoccupations with the negative part of what it brings, without, I don't know, acknowledging enough of for one, it's never going away, and all the good that it brings. When you look at this, do you talk about some of these things in your book? I know that I read a few little passages that were available, and it's very storytelly. So again, you're bringing your English literature into it, where you're telling stories about, as you just did. Where do we connect? How do we connect teachers to it better, so that they can see that there is a long-term benefit? And how can they start to, in small little pieces, so that it's not like
overwhelming?
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I wrote it as a story. So there is enough information and content out there about AI and what it is, and whoever wants to learn about it, you can go and learn about it and access it for free online. But there's something about telling stories, and there's some and in multi-layered environment of AI as well. But we respond to stories, we connect with stories, and we understand through storytelling. And I wanted to weave in the journey of computing and AI, the journey of literacy and education within a story. And that's where it anchors through the generations of my family. And I wanted to highlight the real importance of us owning our data and owning our story. Because if we don't own it, then AI will, at a micro level, at a personal level, but also at a historical level, and at a, we still have almost 3 billion people without access to the internet, and AI is now, as I mentioned, like literate and able to tell all these stories using data. Well, what's happening to those people, the 3 billion people who don't have access? What's happening to their stories? How are they being recorded? So that's why I weaved it in and into this storytelling, so that it is accessible, and it can go very quickly to, we can easily, our imaginations go quickly to doom and gloom.
Right.
But if we understand and we are aware of how anything, but in the case of AI, how it works, it really does minimize the fear, and it gives agency to be able to say, to give an opinion. So you still might think robots were going to take over the world, but I'd rather each of us individually had enough knowledge to be able to have an opinion than have to listen to Elon Musk or whoever is telling us what's going to happen, right? So when you understand that AI, the machines have been built over the models have been trained and built over decades and improving over time using our data, and how the progress of that data, that data journey came from, social media, internet starting, so it's young, 1990s, right? And to us now feeding enormous amounts of data that our brains cannot even fathom how much data these models are accessing. When you see that that's how it's working, mathematical models using our data to make predictions, it feels less overwhelming than, oh my God, Terminator's coming and our world's done, right? And then you're going to start to see, oh, well, maybe it is the responsibility of governments to put frameworks and laws in place to control the development, because industry's job, their only job, is to make money. And they will not stop, like that's what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to govern and to self-govern. It goes against, the stock market, basically. So, when we can each have our soapbox to stand on, I think, and we've seen over history in the industrial revolutions, when we each have that literacy, we can each contribute to the world that we want to see and how we want to move things forward.
Absolutely. I love that you're mentioning too the humanity of it all. That, I mean, the stories come from us. They come from our history. They come from our families, our friends, that no machine can take that and claim it as their own, or, right? So we do have that up, that won't ever go away. And they learn from what we already know. Like, as you were saying, the input that we put in, and more so. I mean, we should all be being paid by AI, I think, just because of all the help we're giving these machines to learn more. It's coming from people. But I love that perspective on that.
Yeah, I think there was a study I read a number of years ago that if we were each paid a few cents for each data point we put in, we would alleviate poverty.
Right.
That was big change that we can have. And and there's the argument that AI can code for us now, AI can write for us now. For sure it can, but no AI system will be able to have this relationship you and I have in this conversation that we're
Right.
having right now.
Right.
And then I will take my learning and our conversation to another experience. So we are built on stories, and I do talk about this, that and it's important that we share our stories, because it especially for the generation today
Mm-hmm.
and their future generations, storytelling gives us a confidence and a foundation. It roots us to navigate chaos and uncertainty, and we're definitely, I would say, quite deep into that chaos and uncertainty now. And when you can have stories, either from your parents, your grandparents, or through books, they do provide a certain level of comfort to navigate, and sort of like a roadmap of sorts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the book was just released not that long ago, right? It
Yeah, a
was
couple of weeks ago.
out there. How do you feel people have responded to it so far?
I don't know how many people have read it, because it
Okay.
literally has
Okay, sure.
it has just come out, and I did have beta readers,
Hmm.
which everyone's going to say, "Oh, it's great." So, I don't know. My goal with the book was, it's not a work of literary genius. That wasn't the purpose of it. And I also felt an urgency. It took me about 6 months to write.
Hmm.
I felt this urgency to bring this forward. It's not talking about like today's AI as much as, again, anchoring its journey, so that we can all start to engage in
Yeah.
what we want our societies to look like. So I hope when the goal is to provide enough information so that somebody can talk with a little bit of knowledge about what artificial intelligence is. I get to speak a lot about AI at conferences and whatnot, and I will always start off saying, I'm going to assume none of you know what artificial intelligence is, because we talk about it in society so much, and I really don't think we know what it is.
Yeah.
We because it's just moving so quickly.
Oh, for
So
sure.
the goal is, I have a definition of AI, and I would say, like, really, really off the cuff, it's when machines can learn from data and make predictions. Like, that would be there has to be a learning component to it. But
Mm.
everyone should be able to have their definition. And there are many, 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 many definitions. And I do talk about this. Like, there's no one set definition, but we should each be able to explain it in our way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed too when we're offering workshops now and AI is in the title, we're sure to get a ton of people to it because
Right. Yeah.
as you noted, like it's this figuring it out, like what is it, and like I agree with you. I think a lot of us and some that have been dabbling in it are still trying to get our minds around it and how we are going to fit inside this, or not fit inside, but coexist with
Yeah.
um this tipping point that's happened what was it, November 2022.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where it
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
just
Which,
the box was opened.
yeah, which, the get in when ChatGPT was released, and that
Hmm.
was ChatGPT 3.5. So there was a 3, there was a 2.5, there was a 2. So it was, again, like these moments of a building up. And it was only at the point where a generative AI model was able to create new content where we woke up, right? And so that's also that literacy.
Hmm.
Prior to that, AI has been around, again, for decades.
Right.
And we have had, we've been using Google Translate and, maps and all these, that has been using artificial intelligence models.
Right.
But it was a moment that a general AI was able to create new content for us, that we all went, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
It's
does
like
this
when you,
mean?
yeah, that first like try of generating an image from a prompt, and you're just like,
Yeah.
what did this just do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's just, and we see that in teachers too, and we're showing like we'll demo like how to create a rubric with ChatGPT for given grade level subject and stuff like that, and their eyes popping out with how quickly it can generate stuff like this that would have taken an hour, or more.
Yeah.
And somebody shared this rule with me. They said 80-20. So AI can take care of like 80% of this stuff, but the
Yeah.
20% still is you. You got to go and
Yeah.
vet the stuff and tweak and fortify it. And so
Yeah.
I love the percentage that we can kind of offload some of this stuff, but we are still required. Our literacy and our numeracy is also required to be
Yeah.
able to understand and interact with, which I think you shed some cool light on today.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting. Well, Kate, this has been really fun. I thank you for putting this book out, for being a leader in this field here in our province, and I'd love to continue this chat down the road. I think there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah. Thanks. It's been a pleasure. Great to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot.